Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. It's a great pleasure to welcome you all to this webinar. I am delighted to see participants joining us from so many parts of the world, which truly reflects the global relevance of this debate. Let me, as a way of starting, briefly introduce the International Union for the Scientific Study of Population to those less familiar with it. We are a global network of population scientists from all around the planet. The IUSSP promotes the scientific study of populations, encourage international exchange, and support evidence-based discussion on population trends and their social, economic, and policy implications. Today's event is a clear example of this mission in action. About this debate, you may see that it addresses an issue that is no longer just a passive headline, the sustained decline in natality. It began in developed context, including South Korea, for example, and it is now spreading to developing nations such as Vietnam, Chile, Uruguay, and so on. And it's likely to extend further across the globe. Given both the scale and the speed, this trend points to a potential breakdown of intergenerational arrangements with wide-ranging social, economic, and cultural implications. Precisely the issues this debate seeks to explore. In doing so, it is the desire of the IUSSP and of all of us, I can imagine, that discussions remain grounded in a human rights perspective, particularly regard to the sexual and reproductive right of couples. Mentioning here the ICPD from 1994 that affirming the rights of individuals to make their own reproductive choice, whether to have children, how many, when. In this context, today's concerns about low natality should focus on enabling those who are unable to implement their reproductive preference to do so, which happens to be often the most vulnerable. Having said that, now I would like to warmly acknowledge and thank the organizer of this webinar for all the work done. And it's my pleasure to briefly introduce them. Stan Becker, well known to many of us, he's an emeritus professor at Jadhav University and has dedicated decades of demographic research. Notably, he has evolved from concerns with rapid population growth to today's challenge population decline. He's a long-standing and committed contributor to the IUSSP. He has coordinated panels, organized webinars, and participated in key plenary sessions at our International Populations Conference that happens every 4 years. Also, Apoorva Jadhav, she's a senior fellow now at the Population Reference Bureau, where she leads efforts to communicate high impact of demographic research as well as fertility and infertility to the common public. Previously, important to say, she served as a senior demographer at the USAID, overseeing demographic surveys and helping translate key population trends into policy and programs priorities for government and international institutions. So, Stan and Apoorva, thanks for bringing this event together. Now, over to you.
Thank you very much. And thanks to each and every one of you for joining this debate. I counted in the registrations, there were 74 countries represented, and I'm honored to be a facilitator of this session. It will proceed as shown on this slide. The attendees, you're answering a poll or answered the poll. Thomas Sobotka will provide some background. Then we'll have a coin flip to decide which team goes first or last, and they will speak alternating. We have 2 on each team, and they have 8 minutes each maximum, and we'll have a timer. And then each team of debaters has 3 minutes to respond to the other team's arguments. And then we'll have Q&A, a healthy 15 to 20 minutes, a little longer if any of the presenters take less time. And then we'll have a poll at the end also. And then we'll show the results of the poll, the before and after poll. And Laura Wong will provide some closing comments. So And in the Q&A, please, you can put your questions. You can also vote for you like previous questions or whatever. Please type your question and say which team and ideally which person you address it to, so they know exactly who needs to address your question. Or if it's just to the team, that's okay. They'll figure that out. Let me go to the introductions. First, we have Thomas Sobotka, who is leads research group on fertility and population change, and is deputy director of the Vienna Institute of Demography. Among other things, his research focuses on global low fertility and family changes, family policies, and fertility data and measurement. Next, we have for the YES team, Anna Rotrik is director of the Population Research Institute at, can't pronounce that very well, Vasilito, and a docent of the University of Helsinki. Her specialization is in comparative European research on fertility, family dynamics, and social policy, and she served as demographic rapporteur to the Finnish government. Also on that team, Reiko Hayashi is current Director General of Japan's National Institute of Population and Social Security Research. Her research focuses on global health, urban population history, and aging. She is also Vice President of IUSSP at the current time. For the NO team, Vegard Skirbik is a professor at the University of Oslo and a researcher at the Norwegian Institute of Public Health. He's a population economist whose research focuses on the links between aging, health, and worker productivity. Yongtae Cho, the second on that NO team, is a professor of health demography at Seoul National University School of Public Health. He does research on social determinants of health, population aging, and policy responses to South Korea's lowest low fertility. So now we'll proceed. Thomas will give an overview of the area.
Yes, thank you. So it's very exciting to be part of this discussion. Thank you for inviting me. And what I will try to do in my 8 minutes is to give a high-speed background to the topic. Today, we have more than 60 countries globally which have already experienced population declines by 2024. This is not a picture of natural population decline. This is a picture of the overall population decline. I couldn't find a good figure of the natural population declines, but there is a strong overlap between the two. And you see that today, this is especially an issue. Historically, it has been an issue in European countries. They are increasingly joined by countries in East Asia, especially China in a couple of last years. And in the next decades, also Latin American countries and more Asian countries are expected to join the list of countries with declining populations. Recent experiences of crises, conflicts, and the COVID-19 pandemic seem to have accelerated the shift towards population decline in a number of countries. And of course, we all know one big driving trend behind these population declines are falls and drops in fertility rates. We have had many countries who experienced low fertility rates, below replacement fertility already historically. A century ago, I can mention the city of Vienna in 1934 had a total fertility rate estimated around 0.64, 65 at the time. It was a time of the serious economic crisis and disruption, but still, just to remind us that there is nothing new about low or extreme low fertility rates. Nevertheless, we have had an increasing number of countries in the last couple of decades joining the ranks of countries with very low fertility rates, with total fertility rates below 1.3. Today, more than a quarter of global population lives in countries with such low fertility rates, especially due to China joining the ranks of these extreme low fertility rate countries. And the experiences of the last decades show us, first, that there is a huge variation in these low fertility rates across the low fertility world. So we are almost getting out of proper terminology to name different levels of fertility rates, ultra low, extreme low, very low fertility rates. We are running out of words. But the other marked phenomenon is that many countries have seen sudden fertility slides from low to extreme low levels in a matter of several years, maybe 5-10 years, sometimes during shocks and crises, sometimes during times where we don't have any obvious explanation why the trend happened just in that time. And the 2010s were a point when many countries experienced such fertility slides. I can mention China, but also outside of the usual group of low fertility countries, a number of countries in Latin America, including Uruguay and Chile, for instance, experienced such rapid fertility slides since the 2010s. Of course, governments are worried, people are worried about this trend, and somehow population decline is a very strong marker, a symbolic marker of a massive change or of this long-term shift in population dynamics, which captures a lot of media attention. And the attention is not only by the media, policymakers are paying attention as well. And over the last half a century, we have seen an increasing number of countries whose governments claim that their aim is to increase fertility rates. And it used to be mostly countries in Europe. Today, these are often countries in Asia and sometimes also outside of Europe and Asia. So the race of explicitly pronatalist policies or expectations is definitely part of this package. Now, despite having low or very low fertility rates, the experience doesn't necessarily equal population decline or natural population change. We are demographers, so we know that natural population change happens due to a combination of fertility, low fertility, changing population age structure, population momentum, and mortality changes. And of course, when we look at population growth, migration matters a great deal as well. If you look at a picture of European countries today, it's remarkable that total fertility rate has almost no correlation with population growth in these countries. We have countries with very low total fertility rates, which have massive population declines, such as, not surprisingly, Ukraine due to outmigration, but also those with extreme low fertility rates like Malta, which have experienced massive population growth. So population growth is not a good marker of low fertility rates. Let me illustrate that on the example of two countries with long history of low fertility rates, Canada and Spain. Canada has seen its total fertility rates diving to about 1.5 since the 1970s, and with some fluctuations remaining there. Spain experienced later fertility decline, but towards lower levels. Now, this has been naturally translated to declining rates of natural population growth, but even after half a century of very low fertility rates, Canada still has positive natural population growth today. So this is an indicator which comes with a big time lag after fertility decline, but also is not a perfect marker of very low fertility rate. But now look at population growth. In both countries, we have seen uninterrupted population growth. Canadian population doubled in the last half a century, despite having a total fertility rate of 1.5. We have seen a lot of governments trying to roll out explicit pronatalist policies. This is an example of Hungary, which has very ambitious goals to reach total fertility rate at a replacement level, racking up government spending. But when you look at the simple graph of births and deaths, and you look at the trends in births since the start of the Orban government, which increased these pronatalist policies by a great deal in the last 15 years, you see that birth trends are often not responding in the expected direction, not only due to small impact of pronatalist policies on fertility, but also due to outmigration and negative population momentum in the country. Now, just to mention, there is also a lot of debate. What is the optimal level of fertility or population growth? And as you will see in the debate, demographers are not in agreement about that. Now, just a short look into the long-term future, especially East Asian countries, including China, are expected to experience unprecedented population declines in the next half a century. China losing perhaps half of its population, about 700 million people in the next 80 years. And this will mostly be driven by low fertility. But again, age structure, migration, and mortality will also play a role in determining how countries' populations will decline or stay stable or decline fast or slow. From a very extremely long-term perspective, the question mark, are we in a very unusual period of population peak or not? This is a kind of long-termism perspective from the perspective of millennia. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now we'll go to the coin toss. Okay, so tails means that the no team goes first. And in the no team, the first person to speak will be Young-tae Cho.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Young-tae Cho. I am professor at Seoul National University and also director at Population Policy Research Center. Just like many of you, I don't believe that the government should completely abandon policies aimed at supporting fertility. But for providing a supportive environment for parents and children is very important. Nevertheless, there is a reason why I advocate that an adaptation policy direction is more practical and effective than encouraging birth. Since I live in South Korea and have been deeply involved in the Korean government's population policy processes, I will build my argument based on the empirical reality of Korea. And my ally, Dr. Skorbeck, later on, he will discuss why adaptation strategies are, necessary from a more macroscopic and global perspective rather than at a single national level. Okay, and shortly after South Korea's total fertility fell to 1.18 in 2002, as you see here, the government enacted a special law and officially began its policy intervention in 2006. And we mainly implemented typical welfare-oriented policies, which is lowered the direct cost of childbirth and improved the quality and accessibility of childcare services. However, as the fertility rate continued to drop, the government simply raised these welfare benefits to encourage childbirth. So around 2016, this is the time. And despite spending approximately $200 billion over 20 years, the TFR has plummeted and currently hovers around the 0.8 level. Over the past 20 years, the physical and social environments for pregnancy, childbirth, and childcare have objectively improved, but the demographic outcome has not followed suit. So the size of newly born cohorts has shrunk to a half, a third, or even 1/4 of their predecessors. So as you see here, I was born in 1972. My cohort size was approximately about 1 million, but last year we had only 250,000 baby born. So as a result, we now see secondary schools where teachers outnumber students, and nearly half of all universities are currently unable to fill their freshman quotas. Because the number of already born cohorts is so small, it is mathematically possible to predict exactly when and how much they will impact primary schools and secondary schools, universities, national defense system, the labor market, and our social security structures, and so on. And I call this the determined future, and I have even published the book. You see this here. I even published the book with the same title in Korea. And therefore, to reduce the anticipated social impact caused by those locked in smaller cohorts, the government must proactively plan to change the institutions, order, or social structures that currently operate for larger cohorts. That is exactly what adaptation is. However, the government has failed to effectively prepare and implement both encouragement and adaptation. This is because the government's focus of population policy has been entirely centered on mitigation. In fact, South Korean government 70% of the massive budget spent on population policy over the past 20 years has been used to improve the childcare and rearing environments. Clinging to encouragement has resulted in neglecting adaptation. This has caused social confusion and made life of the next generation very difficult. Recently, well, some of you know that Korea fertility rate has been rising slightly. The TFR, which hit a lowest low of 0.72 3 years ago, rose to 0.80 last year. The government is quick to frame this as a victory for encouragement policies. However, the absolute number of annual births remains stagnant, moving only from 240,000 to around 247,000. So even if the fertility rate climbs to 1.3 by the mid-2030s, then the number of births will struggle to exceed 300,000 because the base of women of reproductive age has already shrunk significantly. So the recent increase in TFR is attributable to the rise in age-specific fertility rate among women aged 30s. As you see here, that was the previous year and last year. So given that the mean age at first marriage for women has continuously risen to 32 years old in last year, the likelihood of these individuals having a second child after age 35 remains very low. In fact, firstborn children currently account for 64% of all births, while the proportion of second or higher order birth is declining. So consequently, it is difficult to conclude that the recent uptick in TFR will lead to an increase in the completed fertility rate. So therefore, population policy we need more urgently is adaptation strategy. It is that proactively redesigning the social institutions and order built by the older, larger size cohorts to align with the smaller size of the newer cohorts. Focusing solely on encouraging birth is a mitigation approach, which is ultimately no different from telling the next generation, we are not going to change the larger size social order built by the many, so it is up to you to increase your numbers to fit our system. Well, conversely, adaptation is an act of structural empathy, I believe, and it is preparing institutions and order suited to the next generation in advance, considering their quantitative and qualitative reality. In a shrinking world, the state's mandate is not just to fight the tide of history through incentives alone, but to build a vessel that can sail in shallow water. Well, I know that it is politically and socially very difficult for a government to pivot toward adaptation in the early stages of fertility decline. It is much easier for politicians to promise a reassuring return to growth than to tell voters the hard truth, which is that society must fundamentally reorganize itself for a small population. However, as empirical evidence from numerous countries has shown, escaping the lowest low fertility trap is an extraordinarily daunting task today. So this is precisely where our role as demographers become very crucial. When governments and politicians are preoccupied with mitigation, it is our professional duty to advocate for the absolute necessity of adaptation. Should we not be the ones to provide the intellectual courage to face this determined future when political leadership is still chasing the ghost of the past. And for this reason, I believe that when a population shrink, the government should prioritize policies focus more on adaptation than encouraging birth. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we'll move to the yes team, and Anna Rotrik will be the first one to speak.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. This century will likely be the century of global population decline, and the whole humanity will shrink. And the yes team argues that yes, we do need to adapt on many fronts, in many dimensions, but this adaptation has to include adapting to the new challenges of family formation. I frankly don't understand how we got to a situation where many clever people, including my esteemed opponent, think that it is an either or. Money to families with children or adaptation. Obviously, we need to be both. We need to have a good vessel and ride the tide and not fight it. So yes, the yes team wants a future with children, not without them. I will, it doesn't seem to, yes, good. I will present the situation as I see it. I'm based in Finland, and I will talk about the Nordics. As a background, you didn't see these total fertility rate drops in Thomas's slides, but along with many other countries, we had a drastic and surprising decline in the 2010s. You can also see that during the last years, this decline seems to have plateaued, even slightly reversed, and many Nordic countries are now slightly above the EU average, which may show that part of our family policies still work. Now, 3 Nordic governments are concerned about low fertility. And we have 3 different fertility reports, of which I had the honor to participate in the first one. The Norwegian is just out 1 month ago, and the Swedish one is still ongoing. I borrowed my title, Future with Children, from the Swedish ones, Framtiden med barn. Of interest here are 2 things. First, Norway and Sweden do not have fewer births than deaths. They are not concerned about population decline. They are concerned about the new challenges and inequalities in family formation and the fact that young adults cannot realize their desired family size, as is Finland and myself. So the second thing which unites us is the shared value framework. We want to support the desired number of children, and we do it within a human rights and reproductive rights perspective, and family well-being is more important than numbers of births. I will now briefly present the 2 main take-homes from my own report. I argue there that we need to stand on 2 legs. The first leg are what I call the traditional family policies, the one I had, or my father participated in developing, and which I enjoyed when my own children were born. This is well known to you. We can talk about the Nordic family policy package. It has been, with robust quasi-experimental studies, shown to be associated with somewhat higher fertility levels, both total fertility and cohort fertility. They are also associated with child well-being and gender equality. And here we have childcare, parental leaves, cash transfers, but also family-friendly workplaces, infrastructure, neighborhoods, free healthcare, free education. It takes a package. And with all due respect to my South Korean colleague, I'm not sure South Korea has even this basic package yet. This package also needs to be really protected and prioritized as societies age. I feel it in Finland. Our public finances are very strained, and they are cutting down on even these basic services and allowances. Okay, but then the other leg are the new challenges. Here, there are many. I will highlight 3. Firstborns, couples, and socioeconomic inequalities. The first 2 challenges, on the left, you see a declining sharp blue line, We have the birth order intensities taking 2010 as the starting point. The take home here is that of the fertility decline in Finland, more than 80% is due to fewer firstborns being born, fewer first children. You can also see that the likelihood to have a second or third or even fourth child is almost as high today as it was in the beginning of the century, shows that the traditional family policies work, but we have the family formation challenge. Okay, why are so fewer first children being born? Part of the answer is the decline in stable couples among women and men of primary childbearing age. So to the right, you see sharp decline of first marriages, women in the late 20s and early 30s. This is related, we have much cohabitation, and this is related to the fact that cohabitation is more likely to end in separation than in children or marriages. Okay, tied to this, fewer firstborns, less stable couple relations are the socioeconomic inequalities. We have much more childlessness in Finland. Here you see the situation currently for women and men at age 40 today by educational levels. And here the take home is that we see a rise, especially among both women and men with less education. So the family formation, the step to having a partner in a stable partnership and a first child is clearly related to education. The numbers are the same if you look at both individual or couple income. Okay, what could be done? First, understand that the traditional family policies still work, especially for the second, third, and fourth children in the Nordics. But we need to tackle the new challenges. And here I would like to see bold solutions. In my report, I have three main areas which I here present to you. The first would be to really think about what's going on with young adults and tackle the so-called relationship recession. We know most people do want stable couple relationships, and we can do many things here, including enhancing digital well-being, and of course, all the usual things, education, housing, access to the labor market, and so on. Second, we need to rethink family policies so that they do not reward later births, but also make it possible to have a child in your 20s and lower the threshold to become a parent for all kinds of families, and introducing new and upfront economic incentives to counteract this trend which we see that those with less income and less education are also much more likely never to have a family. And again, I stress this is, we know most of the childlessness is unwanted and undesired. Third, we should support fertility awareness and really add family planning to the family planning education and services, which the Nordic countries have been really great in. I mean, promoting contraception and reproductive rights and so on. And my colleague Reiko will speak more about the needs for cultural adaptation.
Thank you. On to the No team and Vegard Skibek.
So thank you for inviting me, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to address a topic which I hope will continue to be addressed in the years to come. This is certainly something that stirs a lot of interest, and I think demographers have been not visible enough in the public debate. So I hope this will also stimulate further public discussions on the topic, also reaching outside scholarly ranks. So I'm part of the No team, but still I certainly believe that we should support families, we should support family equities, we should support helping people have the number of children they want, but we also need a positive demography to adapt to low fertility, low mortality, and aging. And I think many of the issues related to low fertility are or fears of how to deal with low fertility is related to some of its consequences. So I will discuss some of these in the discussion here. So first, there is what do people think about global and national population size? Survey evidence suggests that there's widespread interest and concern on population size. For example, in Nigeria, the majority believe that rapid population growth does not bring benefits, but then 3 types of number think so, then that share that think it's beneficial. And the percent agreeing that population size is too high in terms of global numbers. It's slightly more than half in Egypt, 63% in Nigeria, 76% in Hungary, which was mentioned earlier, 49% in the US. And also, if you ask about your own country, it could be that people would like to see high shares, population shares in their own country in spite of preferring a lower global population size. You still see that more than 4 in 5 Indians think that the population size is too high in India. India is a country where we have installed recently pronatal policies in some states. US, it's also very high, 37%, Japan 16%, France 26%, Egypt 56%, Brazil 50%, and Nigeria 72%. Also, I think it's important to remember that many of the key reasons for fertility decline are often seen as positive, including better education, less unplanned fertility, less adults in pregnancies, and more gender equality. How many people are needed to uphold a culture, a belief system, and a way of life? Many successful cultures are spreading in spite of having low fertility, ranging from the great importance of, say, Korean culture in recent years to maintaining cultures in many other countries facing low fertility. Few workers are likely to be needed in the future. Automation displacement potentials are very high. Using current technologies, one does not need more than a tiny share of the number of agriculture workers in the world, whereas the largest industry, if only current technologies, not future technologies, would be implemented. And how many children would we need to pass on our genes at the population level? That is also something that might be misunderstood, that genetic similarity could be very low after just a few generations. So, and with respect to the economic argument, here's one descriptive study Jose Navarro and I did on GDP by countries with above replacement level fertility, the red shaded area, and below replacement fertility countries. And you see that unlike the situation in the 70s and 80s, now almost everything produced in the world is produced in low fertility countries with low and actually much lower fertility levels than what was the case in the 90s. And much more is produced in the world in spite or because of population decline. Genetic consequences are often misunderstood. Even if you don't have children on your own, this is a key driver of reproduction, according to some surveys, and a key issue, for example, in evolutionary biology for understanding reproductive behavior. And even if you do not have children, the fact that you typically have relatives who have children means that the genetic resemblance of the potential descendants you would have would be quite similar to the case if you would be childless, would be quite similar to the case for those who had children after 6 generations, and more so for if you go further down the lineage line, because your siblings are likely to pass on children. I also tested this empirically, and the fairly low differences. A key issue also with respect to the labor market, which is also not sufficiently addressed, is that there's been a massive underinvestment in education. This is even if literacy levels have increased and are generally fairly high in most countries, the quality of schooling is very low. This is the shares with below the lowest PISA score in different countries, and you see clear majorities in most countries with high population growth, which suggests a strong underinvestment in school quality. And that is a key driver of how life will be for many of these individuals. And I think it's important to address this, to try to, because increasing school quality is a key dimension for how to deal effectively with the inevitable population aging. Also, health is a key issue. Many countries that tend to have fairly old population tend to have relatively good health. This is the health level or the age that has the same health as the average 65-year-old in the world. And you find that the countries such as Japan, you have the same health in your 70s as somebody in Papua New Guinea in his or her 40s. And if you account for this, you find that, for example, Japan could have a lower dependency ratio. This is the health-adjusted dependency ratio, as opposed to the old age dependency ratio measures, which unfortunately are still a lot used, than India, for example. So India has a lot of potential to improve health. But if you adjust for health, in spite of all having an older age structure, Japan has lower dependency than India, for example. And the same goes for many other countries. In sum, who ages best in terms of health and function is, I would say, one of the key challenges of the 21st century. And it's a key way of how to effectively deal with population change. Young countries tend often to have worse health and to functionally be older, to underinvest in education, which creates massive challenges for the future labor market. And we do have very high dependency ratios in the past, often because of higher child dependency ratios, which actually were in many countries much higher in the 60s and 70s than what we're likely to see towards the end of this century, especially if you account for health. And it will likely be easier this time to deal with higher dependency ratio because of new technologies. And we should also spend much more time trying to learn and to adapt from low fertility nations and how one can become successful agers at country levels. I think one should learn from different countries at different learning. For example, how to not to avoid too low fertility, how to deal better with including all the individuals in the labor market, and also to deal better with maintaining health and cognitive and physical functioning as populations grow older. And finally, his one book, which I wrote a couple of years back, which focuses on low fertility, and some of the arguments are outlined in some more depth there. So thank you very much.
Thank you. On to our last debater is Reiko Hayashi for the Yes team.
So I'm going to say yes for the countries with modest numbers should implement or increase incentives for childbearing and subsidies for child rearing. I'm from Japan, and then now I'm with the flowers, sakura, cherry blossoms blowing now in Japan. And I'm going to say yes from the Japanese point of view. So the first thing I would like to say is that incentives to childbearing and subsidies for child rearing are various. It's not only money. So this is how we just sorted out all the policies and measures which were implemented in East Asian countries, in Japan, Korea, and China. So there are many domains. There are incentives given in the employment, flexible working and maternity leave, and many things, and also for childcare and education. We have to provide nursery centers, kindergarten, and also education cost support is important, and so forth. And also, of course, economic support is child allowance is something which most of you are thinking about as the of the incentives and subsidies. But also there are the health system we have to provide for the low fertility society. Then in our society, the marriage support is important because we are thinking marriage is prerequisite to be pregnant and to have babies. And then, of course, housing support. So it varies. There are many kinds of policies to combat, to mitigate the low fertility, which can be, as Anna mentioned, which can be helpful. And can be helpful directly, but most importantly, these governmental policies are important because it changes social norm. So this is about 100 years of Japanese total fertility rate in red line and replacement level in blue line and the corresponding policies. But due to the time constraint, I would like to mention two things. During the wartime, in 1941, we have made outline for the establishment of population policy, which is a pronatalistic policy that government launched, saying that women should not work, they should get married as soon as possible, and each family should have 5 children. So this is one policy, yes, but we don't know the result afterwards, because afterwards it is during the war. We don't have the proper statistics. But what I want to say is that this kind of pronatalistic policy just put the population thinking that population policy is something pronatalistic, something government is controlling over the personal life. So we had this taboo of launching this pronatalistic policy even though we have a very, we started to having the very low fertility since 1974. It kept on going down and down and down, but during this time we didn't do anything. So that means that this policy can form a societal view, social norm, and then also social perception. But then after that, we had another thing is that there is this fire hose here, fertility drop, and people decide, actually this is again 2000, this year we have again fire hose year, but we have this superstition saying that the girl who was born on this fire hose year is going to kill the husband in the future. So that is how the fertility dropped and went up again. So this shows again how people decide their reproductive behavior. And then this thing have also was kind of trigger to start the new era. In 1990, we realized that the fertility rate went below fire hose year. So finally, we decided to move out from that social taboo of thinking about having a good environment for the young couple to get married and have children. So after that, we have series of policies. Then it went up again. But then after that, since 2015, everywhere in the country is having the lower infertility. So this is how the policy affect the people's mind, and then also it can work in some time. This is a kind of recent example how the policy works. This is childcare leave uptake. Since 1994, we are having this childcare leave, which after the child was born, you take this childcare leave with paid. It is paid. Then this is woman. Woman started to take a lot of childcare leave, and then it was remained about 80%. But for a long time, men did not take this childcare leave, although they are entitled to have it. But then since 2016, it started to go up. Then from 2020, it go up and up again, and now it reached to 40%. Why? Because one of the things is that since 2016, we have started to work on the law for the work style reform. And then we have started in 2016, and then we have implemented in 2019. So it have affected people's mind so that people just change the work style. And then also COVID-19 changed working style. So we just take it normal to work in the telework system and the flex time. So this is how one of the things that we can think that policy is important. Another thing that we have to think it is about the social norm is that here there is a total fertility rate of 5 countries, and then here we can see that, well, for these 4 countries, there is a kind of divergence in the middle of 1970s. The German, this is about US and France, and then it kept on staying in the high level. What happened on the right panel? This is a proportion of birth out of wedlock. So in 1970s, European Convention on the Legal State of Children Born out of Wedlock. So at the time, the children's rights became equal, regardless of the parents who get married or not married. But it was only in 2013 this equal rights of children were guaranteed in Japan. And then, so it's still, birth out of wedlock remains very low. So this might be the reason why the total fertility rate is very low in Japan and probably in Korea. And then this is how the society, the policy, and the law makes the social norm. And we might have to change it. So another thing is that this is the assisted reproductive technology. which is important, and then which is also a policy-based thing, and then which is very effective. So just the last slide to back up Anna's point. We are having policies, but not enough for family compared to health for the older people and pension for old age. So still there are plenty of room for the policy to intervene on the fertility issue. Sorry for overtime.
Thank you. Okay, we'll go to the no team for a 3-minute response.
Yeah, can I, yes. Well, I actually have one comment to Anna that Nordic countries, I know that your fertility rate so far it's been very high compared to other European countries, but these days, I guess since 2016, around 2016, 17, TFR of Nordic countries also started to decline, even though your family policy is still very good and probably better than before. And how would you explain that?
Want to give them your time or wait to have your 3 minutes and then they respond?
I can maybe add one point while we're at it, and just in terms of how fertility decline is portrayed. So we only used gross measures of fertility decline, where you don't take into account mortality. So we look at the long-term trends especially for European countries, and well, even more so for East Asian countries. Actually, you find that fertility tended to peak at much lower levels than what gross fertility measures indicate. So, which means that, for example, for the decline is much more modest than what would be indicated by the use of only gross fertility measures, such as the total fertility rate. So please use also net reproductive measures as well.
Anything else, Youngtai?
Actually, one question to Reiko, that I know that Japan fertility rate it's higher than Korea, but still the annual number of birth is declining in Japan, even though you spend really a lot of money for the family policies. So in that case, still do we need to spend most of the population budgets for the population policies focus only on the family policies, or shall we not prepare for the future because we already know the smaller size of the newer cohorts?
Okay, are we ready to go over to the other team? Anything else, Vegard? Okay, so now 3 minutes for Anna and Reiko.
What happened in the Nordic countries, especially in Finland, our family policies still work for the second, third, fourth child. We have them much more than, for instance, in Asia. The challenge is the first child, family formation, having a partner, feeling ready to have a child, feeling you can afford it. This is the new challenge, and we need new policy solutions to that. And that was basically the take home of my talk. I'm not sure what Vegard really asked, but if you meant cohort fertility rates in Finland, it seems we are now down from 1.9 in the previous generations to maybe 1.5 even. So this, whatever fertility measures you look at, tempo adjusted cohort fertility rates, they will be significantly down by about 30%.
Go to Reiko first and then back.
Okay, so maybe I should answer first. Yes, there are fewer and fewer children, but also there are now in some municipalities, older persons are becoming fewer. So again, there is the balance between old person and young people, how to allocate the resources. So my question to the no team is that in Korea, and Vega is coming from Finland, and then no way. Okay, and then don't you think that in your society, is there any room to do more, to do better, to have a better family life, or to raise the fertility? That is my question.
Okay, Anna, you want to finish?
Yeah. So my question to both of you or especially to Vegard, we know that as fertility goes down, there's a demographic dividend. That's super well known. But the thing is, when fertility goes very down and societies are very aged, that seems to turn into a demographic drag. So if you look at the actual outcome in productivity, in GDP per capita growth in Japan, Finland, the most aged societies, or within countries, it doesn't look very prosperous. So absolutely we should learn, we should adapt, but we must also acknowledge that a disadvantageous, very aged population structure will create economic challenges, which are very unlike those when first fertility started to go down.
Okay, we'll take a minute for Vegard and Young to answer very quickly, since we're out of time, as it were.
Mm-hmm. So first of all, I think more can be done for housing equity. That is an important issue to make it more, perhaps for non-pronatal reasons as well, just to make it easier for families, because it's become a lot more difficult to establish yourself. In terms of fertility policies, it's still very difficult to establish causal relationships, so we don't necessarily know. And I think the world is so different now with new technology, so it's very hard to say that what the consequences will be. And I do think so many European countries are facing perhaps low economic growth, but they're facing competition from especially East Asia with even lower fertility. So it's not obvious that it's driven by low fertility. And also some of the countries that have low fertility today have had low fertility for a very, very long period of time. And I think we also learn from them and see how they have maintained their economic output. And there are many reasons why it might have fallen in several countries.
Thank you. Any last word, Young-tae?
Yeah, well, about the productivity, of course, the productivity comes from the number of people. But however, productivity also comes from the how would I say, like quality of the people. So just like Korea, that we ask a question to Koreans that Korea so far has grown, developed dramatically from like 50 years ago from now to now. Is it because of the population size growth, or is it because of the individuals, Koreans individual, our capacity has grown? Of course, everybody says it's capacity grown. That's the answer. So, of course, the size matters. However, I think the capacity of each population is more important.
Thank you. Let's go to Apoorva with a Q&A from the audience.
Yes, thank you so much. There's been a lot of chatter coming in. I'm going to start with a couple of questions that have been posed to both teams. So maybe we'll do a minute and a half for each team. You all can decide who can respond. The first question is about migration. All countries appear to be taking a nationalist approach to dealing with this issue. Are there any opportunities to have more international cooperation or even competition over flexible parts of the international population who are potentially mobile?
We'll start with the yes team.
Yes, if I can go, thank you for that question. I love it. I think it's absolutely silly that governments tackle this nationally. And as you saw, I tried to create a Nordic front. And actually, even with the No team, we have big plans to enhance Nordic European population policies. Obviously, the trends are so similar across the whole globe. We need to stop seeing populations in the old-fashioned king and and citizens way. Yeah.
Okay,
and
Reiko, anything to add?
migration flows also, you know, I mean, people are living in many countries, moving across the lifetimes. Yeah, sure.
Sure. Okay, well, I think some of the challenges with migration is that there's been a massive change in the labor market demands over time, and increasingly one needs more and more high-skilled labor. And it's a problem globally to attract the kind of labor one can do to some extent, but as also mentioned in some of the work I referred to, there's simply a lack of people available for matching the kind of labor demand that is, at least for many of the aging countries, increasingly in demand. And I think that is a key issue, which is highly foreseeable, and one should have invested much more globally in terms of improving skills, and that would also make migration a more viable tool for dealing with aging populations.
Young-tae?
Yeah, and yes, I also think that migration is one of the solutions that we can alternative solutions that we can think of. But as you all know, that the migration is it's not easy solution, because particularly like a country like Japan or Korea, that so far we haven't had a migrant population, much of migrant population in this country, and now we try to open. The question arise that are we, the Korea is competitive, because international migration is also market. So in the market of labor market, of international labor market, is Korea is competitive. That's the key issue.
Can I talk
Thank
on
you.
the migration? Replacement migration didn't work since 20 years ago. People said so, but it was not. But still, having international migration is a good thing to have the society more dynamic. And but still, at this stage, it has to be a bit controlled. That
Thank
is
you
my
so
answer.
much. This wasn't in the Q&A, but I think it's an important theme that wasn't really touched on in either presentations. So this one is about climate change. So this is again to both teams. Do you have research connecting population growth to climate change? The IPCC report that recently came out identified population growth and per capita GDP as the strongest drivers of climate change. Critical considerations we need to consider for the well-being of people, nature, and planet.
We'll start with the S team again.
Yeah, okay, then I will start. Then, yes, climate change, there are a lot of dispute about how to define climate change. But if we just we just connect with disaster also, yes, we have to do many researches on how to be resilient against the climate change, and then also a huge disaster like earthquake and typhoon and so on and so forth. When it comes, it is resilience, how to be responsible and responsive. So that is one of the key issue. But yes.
Anna?
Yes, thank you. So really good question. I think we have to keep in mind the situation now. The whole humanity is at the threshold of going below replacement rates, if we are not already. We can't know. So every year fewer babies are being born. In Europe, the question for the Nordics, it's are we 1.3 or are we 1.7? It's not are we 4 or 5, which would pose exponential population growth, would pose a challenge for the climate, but now we are facing exponential population decline. And two things here. There's no evidence currently that countries with a growing population have more CO2 emissions. Yeah, okay, that's my only point.
Anything from the no team?
Yeah, can I go first? Yeah, I think the quantity and quality also becomes a very important issue here. That usually we say the number of people increase, then that's going to cause climate change. But at the same time, we have to consider that who consumes more and who makes more energy consumptions. So in that case, it's maybe age difference, age variation, or country variation. So it's not just the easy answer.
Garn, anything to add?
Well, also that, low fertility countries, yes, they tend to, following up on Jungtai's point, they tend to emit more greenhouse gas emissions, and you do have, but many of the negative consequences are felt in high fertility countries. So the positive effects of fertility decline is partly that there will be less emissions, but also that there will be fewer people affected by dangerous environmental change, including climate change, due to low fertility.
Thank you.
Back to
Apoorva?
Thank you. Whew, everybody take a breath. It's a lot coming in. Okay, this is the final question that I'm going to pose to both teams. To what extent does your view on the determinants of low fertility affect your position and policies suggested? For example, is low fertility driven simply by changes in values? Or is it driven by the economics of child rearing in the context of career women? Are there other determinations?
We start with the no team here.
if I could start with that. So I think, of course, it's a mix of different issues, such as one issue we haven't focused so much on is the massive increasing housing cost, which is certainly a key determinant. And many younger people say that this is the reason why they don't feel they can afford to have children. It's simply too expensive to establish themselves. But also values matter, because it also determines at which economic threshold you're willing to start a family. And changes in values, religiosity, life orientations, I think are key and should be addressed much more in the fertility discussion. Thank you.
Okay, anything to add?
Yeah, and also I want to add one thing that we believe that it's a concentration. So density increases, then competition increase. When competition is very high, then it's not just human beings. I think all the creature is the same. That competition is very high, then your survival comes first, then your reproduction. Particularly now that not just in Korea, but many countries that the young generation try to be in urban and they're more concentrated. It's not just the people concentration, it's people with the capacity, the density level increase. Then of course the competition level is incredibly high. And now also they compare themselves with other people, not just in your neighborhood, but somewhere else through SNS. So the level of competition, particularly through the concentration of the people in the urban area, I think we believe that that's the key of the low fertility.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to give a minute or two to the yes team. Anna, would you like to start?
Yes, thank you. So my starting point is always what people say they want and what makes a flourishing life and well-being. And most young adults say they do want a partner and they do want children. And that's really many are not seeing that happen. So that's the rationale. If there would be really low fertility, but everybody would be super happy and flourishing, the situation would be very different. That's not what we see.
Thank you. Reiko?
Okay, so the question was whether it is the social norm or economic level which determines fertility. And in that case, yes, of course, it is mixed. But first, as Hannah mentioned, that maybe economic barrier, motherhood penalty should be resolved. Otherwise, it will be impossible. If you have children and then you lose money, then nobody is going to have the children. But also the social norm is another thing which is important. And we always have to try to change the society with the appropriate policy.
Thank you. Back to Apoorva.
Yes, I'd love to pick up on that last point that Anna and Reiko were making. There's a question for both of you. Maybe you can decide who responds. There's recent research that calls the decline in fertility in Denmark, Finland, and Norway the gender equality fertility paradox. It finds that parenthood is simply not prioritized as a life goal. If that's the case, what really can policies do?
To the yes team.
Anna first.
Well, I don't know what you refer to, but based on we keep serving this and asking people, that's just not true. And if what we see is that especially men with the lowest level of education and income have the most childlessness, that's very hard to put into this prioritized framework. Of course, you always have subgroups and variations, and I'm all for it. And, we can choose not to have children, but basically this is not the main story, what's happening in the Nordics. There's a tighter selection into who gets to have a family at all, and it goes by the socioeconomic gradient.
Thank you. Can we go to the next question maybe? Or Reiko, you want to say?
Yes, I want to say one thing about this question, that even in Finland and Norway, the fertility is going down. And what is happening, yes, maybe it is a kind of family formation change, but I would say that it is relationship recession, as Anna mentioned. Since 2015, many people are using SNS, AI, and then people are losing human touch and human communication. That is one thing which is a reason. So maybe we have to address to that issue.
Thank you. Back to Apoorva.
Thank you. Now I will go to the other team. There's two questions for Youngtae. What is South Korea doing to ensure gender equality? Isn't that part of the issue? And the second is semi-related. How much does culture, especially Confucian values that still persist, along with the past government encouragement of abortion and birth control, continue to influence current fertility rates? What is your opinion?
Well, the gender issue is still, I think, the first question and second question, it goes together because the gender issue is strongly tied to the Confucius idea that, but compared to previous years, it's getting better. And one example is the sex ratio at birth. We, as you all know, that Korea sex ratio at birth was extorted a lot about 20 years ago. So 100 woman, 100 baby girl to 100 like 13, 16 baby boy used to be, but now it became normal, 104. And it's not just the first baby, second baby 105, third baby actually became 99. So that means we really like the baby girls more than baby boys. So it's the country is changing, and of course, the value, it's still remaining, but I believe that it's going to change more.
Back to Apoorva.
Thank you. Now, going back to the yes team. Can we, and this one is specifically for you, Anna, can we still rely on the desired number of children as indicated in relevant studies to understand real intentions? The question implies that someone who wants to have a family achieves this, but as you showed, it becomes the more and more difficult. So the approach of childbearing changes perspective in both research and policies.
Okay, so I'm simplifying obviously hugely when I say, I mean, the wishes are our starting point, but we know these change over life. So for instance, you can be single and not want to want children. This happens quite often. Then when you fall in love, you suddenly want to have children. So, or the opposite. So obviously it changes, it influences by culture, but we do know, so having this simplified state, just asking people what they want, we know your ideal number of own children is a strong predictor of your fertility intentions, and that is a strong predictor of actual childbearing. Obviously, especially in wealthy societies where you have access to good contraception. But that's the best predictor actually of future fertility that we have.
Thank you. Apoorva?
Yes, now going back to the no team. It's for both of you. For the no team, it is right that policies have not been effective. However, one should ask what the level of fertility would have been if these policies had not been implemented. In other words, if these policies had not been implemented, the fertility may have been much lower than the current levels.
Well, the current level in Korea is 0.8. Can it be lower than that? Actually, we asked the same question. Many demographers in Korea, we asked the same question, and some of us say that government policy still worked. Even fertility is very low, but some of us also say that it cannot be lower than this, even though we don't have the encouragement policies. So we don't know the answer yet, but just say that, well, it's already lowest low, 0.7374. And without the policies, I think still it can be around that point. So we cannot really say that the policy really worked.
Becker?
No, I think it's an important question. It's very hard to identify because we don't know how people would think if the policies were not there. But in some countries where policies are much weaker, for example, in the US, the fertility is fairly similar to very generous fertility policy countries such as the Nordics nowadays. So it's not obvious that it necessarily have an effect, but you would internalize. And if the policies would be taken away, you would feel it very different in countries where fertility policies have been generous compared to a country where it hasn't.
Back to Apoorva.
Thanks. I think we have time for another couple of questions. So I'm going to now pose a question to both teams. And it's about basically the age of retirement. Why do we still hold the conception that people will not be working after 65? We've already seen shifts in people working longer. Maybe I'll start with Regard here because you were talking about living longer but living healthier as well. And then we can go to the other teams as well.
So I worked on retirement policy for many countries all around the world, and I think it's one of the most sensitive topics to work on. As a politician, it's certainly not a winning issue to go into, but in many countries. But certainly this is something it's a key issue, and it's completely correct. We should have addressed this many, many years ago. It's population aging has been known for more than a century in several countries, and still retirement policies have been implemented as if population aging is not something we could foresee. And we should have invested much, much more in the functional, cognitive, and health capacities of the aging populations. Definitely, we can increase retirement ages in many, many nations, yes.
And if I add one more thing, that well, I believe that the labor market is like a pipe. So we have age, and it's a pipe. But right now, well, actually, Korea retirement age right now is 60, not 65. And when we have a population pyramid look like this, then we have more people coming into the pipeline, then age well, around the retirement age, they should move out so that the younger generation came in. But now Korean society, the population the pyramid is going to be look like this. In that case, the younger generation coming into the pipeline, but still there is room. So in that case, we can increase the retirement age. So that's why Korean society now is significantly considering the postponing the retirement age to 65. So I think it's really up to the pyramid.
Apoorva, you want to go to the other team?
Yes, we have time for the other team, and then we'll have to wrap it up.
Yes, so retirement policies, it's really a good example for Finland. We have adapted. 25 years ago, we made a system. It's not only a pay-as-you-go system, it also has funds. We have retirement age tied to life expectancy, so we have no demonstrations in the streets when the age goes up. And yet, our very low fertility is now a challenge to this highly adapted retirement system. Would it be 1.5? We would be quite fine. 1.3, if it stays this way, it's challenged. So again, our YES team key thing is we have to do both. Support fertility and adapt.
Thank you. Reiko, you want to say?
Yeah, there are many things to talk about this issue. But the one thing is that maybe we have to change the notion of replacement level. Replacement level have been always calculated against the number of children of fertility, but now people are living longer and longer. So we should have another replacement level which which considers the total population. If we are going to keep on having the longer and longer life expectancy, then the total fertility should be not 2.1. It can be something like 2.8 or 1.8 or 1.6. And then that is how I think it is important to think about retirement life. And then in Japan, retirement age and pensionable age, it is different. And then people are working more and more so that they can receive higher pension later. So things, and then it is very adaptive, the society, to the system.
Thank you. Apoorva?
We are out of time because it's time for the other poll, but I do want to direct your attention as population scientists to a comment in the chat. Why is high fertility in sub-Saharan Africa often framed as a concern while many other societies are worried about below replacement fertility? I think there's an important point here about the tension within our field in talking about high fertility, low fertility, and a lot of anti-rights narratives that are being floated in other settings based on experiences of low fertility. So I'd love for us to keep that in mind as we think about low fertility and lowest low fertility. I think it's over to Paul to launch the final poll.
Okay, everybody can take your second vote. There are 4 possibilities. While we're waiting, I'll mention I was convinced that debates are a very useful way to learn. Back in IUSSP did one of its first ones, I think, in the 80s in Tours, and Jimmy Trussell got these going, and I've found them very helpful. I use them in my teaching, in my course I teach, and I think others may find them helpful also for learning. Okay, are we ready to see the first poll and the second poll? There's the first poll, yes. 53% and 47%. Boy, quite a tie there. Second poll, who convinced who here? Okay, most people stayed the same, 50% there. Some people went from no, yes to no, yes. Yeah, there's change both ways, 9 and 6. So most people kept what they had at the beginning, but a few people were convinced one way or the other, about the same. Okay, so I'll turn it back to Laura to conclude and invite you to other IUSSP things, and I'm glad we had this debate, and I'm sure we've all learned something.
Okay, I have a minute to close this interesting and important debate. So many things lacking, so many things progressing here. Just to remind that in the developing country, developing settings, there is also declining natality, but the large proportion of the new cohorts are concentrated in the most vulnerable people. So the new generation that we need to take account, and taking what one of Sean Gomez says, we have to take care of the generation that is already here, and in the development sense again, this demographic bonus is a bunch of people that is not well qualified, and they will be aged. So there is still a lot of things to do, to research, and as population scientists that we are here, we need also, we feel it in the debate. There are most evidence we need to see really how much children, people who don't want sign up, want to have, and if that's possible. I mean, to implement the reproductive choice, and also always, I'm going to say again, without imposing control, without imposing goals to population. And having said that, thank you again for all of you. All questions will be answered by our guests here. Just to tell again that please remain aware of the IUSSP activities. We have plenty of seminars, new panels that is our branch of widening our activities is going to implement this year. And so please keep attention of our association, our big association. I think that's all. Thank you again to all of you.
Thank you. Over and out.